Hey, this is John. Welcome back to SysEng Quick. In the last video, we set up the control plane nodes for our Talos Linux Kubernetes cluster. In this video, we're going to finish the cluster by adding worker nodes. Let's go ahead and get started. The first nodes I want to add are physical servers. So let's go to the image factory at factory.talos.dev. And let's go ahead and select bare metal machine, as these are physical servers. I want the current version of Linux, so I'll leave that at 1.10.6. These are AMD 64 machines, so we'll go ahead and click Next. I don't need Secure Boot. For system extensions, we actually don't need any. You might need some if you had special hardware the system can't boot without, but I'm just going to be running an ISO to get things booted, and then we will install a different image to the hard drive. So you don't need that for your ISO. But I'll go ahead and add Tailscale, and then we'll have the schematic ID for our actual installation image later, though this will make my ISO slightly larger. We don't need any custom command line arguments for the kernel. And there we go. We've got our schematic ID, and here is the ISO I can use to boot my physical host. I've already downloaded that, so let's go ahead and boot my Talos Linux installation. I've got the iDRAC open for one of my physical Dell servers. Let's go ahead and select Virtual Media. We'll connect the virtual CD-ROM device. We'll choose my Talos Linux image on Talos 1.10.6. We'll go ahead and map the device. We'll hit Close. It's already retrying the boot process, so there we go. We're booting Talos Linux 1.10.6. There we go. The ISO has booted up. It is in stage maintenance. It is in maintenance mode, which means it has no configuration. This makes sense because unlike the openstack nodes we built in the last episode, we haven't supplied any configuration. We need to do that over the API. But this particular server doesn't have access to DHCP, so I don't have any network connectivity. We'll need to solve that problem first. On the Metal ISO installers, it has an option in the console, F3, to configure your network. So I'll go ahead and select that. For DNS servers, I'll just pick one of Google's public DNS servers. The interface I want to configure is ENO 8303, and we'll go ahead and give it an IP address. It needs to have the CIDR notation, so this is a /24, and then give it a gateway. On the right, under New Config, you'll see it goes from red error to green good. If you see a green, your configuration is probably okay. If it's still red, you have got something wrong in the settings. You'll need to go ahead and fix that. Let's go ahead and hit Save. And now I do have connectivity. So now we should be able to apply the configuration to our nodes if we had one. Let's go ahead and generate our configuration and apply it to our servers. Back in my console, I'm going to set this schematic ID. This is the one we got from the Talos Linux image factory that includes the Tailscale extension. Then I'm going to run another for loop to generate configuration for our two worker nodes that are physical. I'm calling them alpha and beta. So we've got this patch file. It's a bit longer than the ones we used for the control plane nodes, mostly because we have to configure the interfaces statically rather than with DHCP. So I've got the machine install image. This is the image it's going to use to actually install to the hard drive. We didn't need to specify this for the openstack nodes because we already had the image installed on the disk. Here, we do need to specify the image. So it's factory Talos dev metal installer, the schematic ID, and a Talos version. This string was present in the Talos image factory on their website, so that's where I got this information. This node IP and valid subnets, When a server has a static IP and multiple IPs, like a tailnet IP and a Kubespan IP, it sometimes gets confused what the real public IP is and complains in the console. So if you add this parameter, it will know what the actual node IP is supposed to be. We've got our host name set down here. I've got all the static interface configuration, so I've got the interface, the addresses, the routes, and the MTU. You may not need to specify the MTU. I've set it default here to 1500 if I don't have the MTU, but I'm actually going to use MTU of 9000 for jumbo frames. And then I'm adding name servers. For the worker nodes, we don't need the Tailscale name servers. That's only needed for the control plane nodes. And finally, we'll close up with the extension service config for Tailscale with my Tailscale authentication key. And again, we go down to Talos control, machine config patch the worker this time, not the control plane. We're patching the patch file and giving it to host. Okay, I had a slight typo in my notes. I didn't have the gateway IP address specified properly, so that was causing the problem. But there we go, it is fine now. So if you look in alpha, we do have the worker node here with the right Kubernetes version. I've got my subnet, I've got my host name, I've got my network configuration, and the name servers and everything else I specified, including the image, which is very important here. I've got the right schematic ID and Talos image version. Now the white property defaults to false. If your disk is empty, that's fine. Talos has no problem commandeering the disk if it is blank. But if it is not blank, you'll need to set this to true to make sure it wipes the disk. Talos wants to have control over the entire disk. So make sure it is actually dev SDA and it's being wiped if it needs to be. But these are fine for my servers because I know they are already blank. Okay, now that we have our configuration, how do we apply that? All we have to do is run another little quick for loop. So for host in alpha and beta, I went ahead and booted the second node. Talos control apply config with the insecure flag. We can only use this when they're in maintenance mode and they do not have any TLS certificates to do authentication with. We'll give it the IP of each of the servers and we'll give it the correct file name to go with. There we go. No news is good news, so let's go back to the console and see what it looks like. We've gone from stage maintenance to stage installing. And in just a few seconds, it should go ahead and reboot into its new configuration. And one of the nice things is that it doesn't actually reboot completely. It actually does a kexec command to simply start a new kernel. This is much faster than rebooting the entire server would be. It's a really nice feature of Talos. So I love that they considered that. There we go. It is in stage booting. It's got the correct host name now. We haven't got the tailnet set up yet. I see the IP address. We don't have a 100 yet, but it should come up very soon. There we go. The tailnet is up now. The stage is now running, but kubelet is okay. It is healthy now. Okay, everything looks pretty good. On the gateway side, it lists it twice. I'm not sure why. I only see that with static network configurations. I'm not sure if I have something configured wrong, but I don't know. Anyway, it seems to be okay, so I'm just going to leave it as it is. So now we've got this node up, let's go see if we can access it from the CLI. So back on our CLI, I want to do Talos control dashboard with the nodes alpha and beta. There we go. We are connected to alpha and beta. Everything looks pretty good now. So it's the same dashboard we had over there. Like I said, I went ahead and booted up the beta node off camera, but we do have our 5 machines in the light cluster. So if I run kubecontrol get nodes, we can see our new alpha and beta nodes are there. So that was really easy to add our physical workers. We simply had to be able to apply the configuration. Now, the one caveat is I did have to have access to the IP address from the server I ran the Talos control apply config from. So that's a minor downside. Like I couldn't configure it through Tailnet. It didn't have the Tailnet configuration yet. So that's pretty minor, but it is something to be aware of. That technically this only worked because there was no firewall in front of that node to intercept my API calls. Now, for the OpenStack nodes, I didn't have to apply the configuration. So even though I had no access to the API ports because they're firewalled off, I didn't need it because I supplied the configuration while we booted. Okay, there's our physical nodes. Next, I want to set up some proxmox nodes. So that will be with a different virtualization platform. So they'll be virtual servers, but they won't be OpenStack. They'll be in proxmox. They're in a different data center, and they're behind a net. And we'll see how easy that is to set up as well. Let's go ahead and generate our proxmox node configurations for Talos. So we're going to boot the nodes the exact same way we did the physical nodes, with an ISO. So I'll use the same ISO I did for the physical nodes for one of the boxes, but I'm going to use a different ISO for the second one. We'll see why shortly. So I'm going to use the same schematic ID for both of them. This is the one we got from OpenStack. It includes the QEMU guest agent and the Tailscale extension. Those are what we need for proxmox. Now we can go ahead and run the for loop to generate our configuration. So for host in Gamma and Delta, I'm going to make a patch file. It's slightly different in that I'm putting the patch file in this current directory. I'm not in that container anymore. I'm on my local system, and I don't have Talos control installed here, and I don't want to. I'm going to run Talos control from Docker, so I'm going to need to put this patch file into my Docker volume. So once I've made the patch file, we're going to create the patches. We are setting up an install image because it's going to install after it boots the ISO. This is what we'll actually install to the disk. So it's pretty similar to the what we did before for the other physical nodes. But I have this M type here. That's machine type. So for proxmox, you can either do it the same way you do physical nodes and do the metal installer, or it has a no cloud installer. So we can supply a configuration similar to how we did with OpenStack. We'll see both methods here shortly. So I've got my network host name and my Tailscale configuration. So because I don't have Talos control installed, I'll run it from Docker. So we're going to do docker run, remove the container when we're done, IT, and then I need to mount the current directory into a path in the container so we can write these files. And because I'm on Fedora and we're using SE Linux, we need the Z option. So the container is going to be GitHub container registry.io, Sidera Labs, Talos control. And then we give it the version, v1.10.6. Then you can supply whatever arguments you want to Talos control. So I'm going to use machine config patch, and my worker file is relative to the data directory. The patch file is also relative to the data directory. So I need to find just the file name for patch file, not the full path like it is up here. And then we'll output that to the data directory with the host name. Okay, we'll go ahead and do that. And you can see I'm actually using Podman, not Docker, but it works the exact same way, so it's fine to do either one. So let's go ahead and take a look at Gamma. There we go. We've got the host name, Kubespan's enabled. The factory image for Gamma is the metal installer, just like with the physical ISOs. And we've got our Tailscale key at the end. But the Delta node is slightly different. We have here the no cloud installer, which is slightly different from the metal installer. We'll see the differences shortly. So now that we have our configurations, let's go create our first node in proxmox. Here's my proxmox console. Let's go ahead and create a VM. I'm going to call it gamma.cpe. The ISO I have already uploaded. It's on my NAS storage under Talos 1.10.6 Metal. I'll go ahead and select the QEMU guest agent. Everything else can be default. I will go ahead and select local ZFS for my storage, disk size 50 gigs, and I will add disk card because this is on an SSD. For cores, I'll go with 4, and then for RAM, we'll go with 8 gigs. For my network, I want to set my MAC address, so it's going to be BC 2411F11249. This is because I have a DHCP reservation in my router. Let's go ahead and hit next. And I'll go ahead and hit finish. So let's go ahead and start this node. We'll go to console. We will start the node. It's booting up the Talos ISO. On EFI host, like our physical nodes, it boots the images with systemd boot. But here it's using grub, so the boot process looks slightly different, but it doesn't really matter. Okay, there we go. And I'm so confused because I've done this a few times, and this DHCP reservation is never working properly. I don't know what I'm doing wrong with that, but anyway, I'm just going to go fix it manually for a minute. Not sure why I keep having to do this, but it was supposed to be 201. There we go. So I've got this fixed, and when it reboots, it's going to be fine. I do not know what's going on with this, but there we go. We now have our host ready. We can go apply the configuration just like we did with our physical nodes. And again, I'm doing this on my local system because that's where I have this network. So I'm going to run docker run rmit, mount my data directory again. Going to use the 1.10.6 container. I'm going to now do apply config in secure, and the nodes is the gamma node, and the file is data gamma.yaml. There we go. It's applied. Let's go see what it's doing in the console. It was so fast, I didn't even see it reboot. So it's already started the reboot process, so I think everything is going good here. Yep, there we go. The cluster says light 1 machine, but now it says 6 machines, so it is finding the rest of the cluster. I see it's already got the Tailscale IP. It is healthy and running. So yeah, this looks good. Okay, next up, we'll do the no cloud installer to show you a slightly different method for proxmox installations. I've returned to the Talos Linux image factory to get the correct ISO. I've actually not tried whether it would work with the bare metal ISO, but I don't think it would. So let's go pick cloud server, 1.10.6. I want to do no cloud. That's for proxmox and a few other things. We're going to go with AMD 64, which is the type of machine my proxmox node is. We're going to not add any extensions. I don't need any for booting, and it will install the image we tell it to from the image property of our configuration. So we'll go ahead and hit next. Don't need any kernel customization. So there we go. Here is our disk image, the no cloud AMD, but I actually want the ISO, so I'll download this. Now I've already added this to my proxmox node, so let's go boot this image in a new VM. We'll go ahead and select Create VM. We'll call it delta.cpe. We'll go to my NAS and select my Talos 1.10.6 no cloud image. Select the QEMU guest agent again. I'll change this to local ZFS and set 50 gig disk size. Add disk card because it is an SSD. We'll go with 4 cores. And we'll go with 8 gigs of RAM. Turn off the firewall, and then I'm going to add my MAC address and see if it works. This second one always seems to work, but the first one never does. Okay, I'll go ahead and hit finish. I don't want to start it yet. Now I want to go over to the Delta machine and click on Hardware. And we are going to add a cloud init device. I'm going to select the storage as local ZFS. There we go. Now we'll go into cloud init. For IP config, I'm going to select DHCP. And now we need to add our configuration file. There's no way to do this from the GUI currently, so we're going to have to do this from the CLI. So let's go back there, and I'll show you how we do that. So first, I'm going to copy my configuration to my proxmox node. So I'll go ahead and put Delta over there. Then I'm going to go to my proxmox node. I'm going to go to var lib vz snippets. This is the local path of the snippets for the proxmox configuration. So I want to move delta.yaml here. I don't think it matters who owns this, but I'll go ahead and change that anyway. Okay, I have my snippet there now. So now I need to run a specific command. So I need to know the ID of the proxmox server I just set up. I happen to know it's 102, but if you don't, you'll have to go find that from your proxmox server. So sudo qm set 102-ci custom user equals local. This is your storage. It's in the var lib vz path, so that is local. And then I want it from snippets, and then I want delta.yaml. There we go. It updated things, so everything should be okay now. Let's see if we can boot that node. Let's go to the console, and we'll go ahead and hit start. Now the instructions on Talos said you would need to regenerate the image. That hasn't been my experience. After I add that file, it's been okay, but your mileage may vary. I can see it is at stage installing, so I know it has a configuration. And the IP address is correct, so yes, this DHCP reservation is working. I'll never understand why the other one doesn't, but that's not really important. So it's already done the reboot into the new image. So very shortly, we should be seeing, yep, it's on the light cluster. Hasn't found all the machines yet, but it will shortly. It's got the tailnet up. It now shows 7 machines in the cluster, so it did find all the rest of the machines. Stage is running, and it says healthy. There we go. We didn't have to use the apply config command, which means I didn't have to have access to the specific IP address of this node. That's one of the benefits of doing it this way. I didn't have to have access to 192.168.1.202. I only had to be able to get into the proxmox CLI and run that command. So that's basically the difference. Your mileage may vary on which one you find better, but I'm not super familiar with the proxmox CLI, so the first way is easier for me, but I have access to that network, so it didn't really matter. Let's go see if the nodes are reachable over the console. So let's do the dashboard command again, and this time we'll go gamma and delta. There we go. There is delta, and there is gamma, and they are all showing healthy. So this all looks pretty good now. So we've got the light machine, 7 nodes. Everything is up there. So let's go ahead and do kube control get nodes. And there we go. All 4 nodes are up there. So even though these hosts are completely behind a NAT, and I have made no holes in my firewall, no port forwards, it is connected to my cluster. And I didn't have to do any configuration. That was all handled for us by Kubespan and Tailscale to get into the API. Okay, that's everything I wanted to cover in this video for setting up the workers. We now have a completely functional Kubernetes cluster with Talos Linux. I hope that you enjoyed the video. If you did, go ahead and hit those like and subscribe buttons. Maybe we'll do other videos in the future on Talos. Thanks for watching. See you next time.